Welcome Leo to your in-depth monthly forecast for May 2025. If we go back to the start of November last year, Mars made the transition from a very psychological part of your scope into your own sign. Mars in the first house is where it really encourages us to showcase our unique identity. And in the sign of Leo, it really gives us the chance to be much more self-assured and self-confident about our goals and ambitions. You may have started to set in motion a new strand or plan or project which really exploded back into life on the 18th of April last month when Mars returned to your sign. You may have gone through a period of frustration, to be honest, from the 6th of January through to the 18th of April when Mars was back in a much more challenging part of your scope. But when Mars moved, that's really encouraging you to seize the moment. You thrive on confidence, but you also thrive on a degree of recognition. And if you have garnered more attention for your creativity, the thrust and excitement you've been creating, that's something that will have made you really feel much more alive. Your physical vitality may also have been enhanced. Now, if people close to you are cheering you on, the opposition with Pluto won't have inhibited your desire to make an impact. It will have heightened your determination. If, however, someone around you is not so keen on what you're trying to do because they may feel it deflects from their needs, that strand could show up right at the start of this month. Now, Venus, the relator, returns to your sector of truth, but all through April it was in a bruising relationship with Saturn. So if there were some difficult conversations about a close connection, an involvement, or even shared finances, it wouldn't be a surprise. But as Venus moves back into your sector of freedom and higher truths, it does merge with the misty but mesmeric energies of Neptune for the first time ever in our lifetimes in the sign of Aries. For you, I feel that this just gives you more encouragement to go with what Mars has been asking you to achieve. But Mars is still broadly opposed by Pluto as you start this month. So if there is some politics, they may need to be spoken through. And one of the things that Venus is meshing in with Neptune encourages you to do is not be too idealistic. Stay as factual as possible. Mercury in Aries, starting this month, will help you in that regard. But the Sun starts this month in a part of your chart where you're really ready to seize the limelight and draw to you much more attention and recognition. So if there is something creative, individualistic, maybe it's a sporting interest, maybe it's as a maker or as a creator, Mars is definitely being turning the dial up in terms of the thrust and the self-belief. But it's the Sun which is asking you to connect that out to the wider world, and that gathering of energy in Aries saying don't be fearful of being more independent in your approach, or perhaps even a little more daring. Now, if you do decide to travel at the start of this month, it could be quite the experience, because Venus and Neptune combined could see you immerse yourself wherever you find yourself in a way which sees you soaking up every ounce of it in such a powerful way. It really can be incredible. If you're lucky enough to encounter someone that you really like, if you're single, Venus goes on to connect with Pluto. Now, Pluto does retrograde from the 4th through to the middle of October in your sector of relationships. So if that's an area that's working well, it can be a time with Venus and Pluto forging a wonderful sextile where the potency of that connection just seems all the stronger. and all the more gratifying. But also Venus in a sextile to Pluto can make us much more conscious of what we yearn for, because Pluto can be about desire, and of course Venus can as well. But Venus in the ninth house is about where we may push outside our comfort zone. So a key moment's reached, particularly when Venus emerges from shadow on the 5th. But I want to tell you that Mercury is going to join the Sun right at the top of your horoscope on the 10th. If you're not particularly happy in your work, it could be that you think about retraining in some ways, but don't necessarily expect somebody close to you to actually be particularly supportive, because Mercury T-squares in a pivot between the position of Mars and Pluto. So over the next few days, there may be something that you're ambitious about, perhaps a job you want to apply for, or even if you have an interview. It is going to be important to understand what the expectation would be of your potential employer or the customer that you may be seeking for your own enterprise. On the 11th, however, a very exciting aspect starts to shape up. Venus aligns with Mars in your sign within 3 degrees, and that's going to go on through to the end of the month. But critically, on the 22nd, they are exactly in a perfect trine. Because Mars is about self-confidence in Leo, and Venus in Aries is about shaking things up, even though Venus is technically in its detriment in Aries, what I like about people who have Venus in Aries natally is it gives them the confidence to go in a direct way for what they need. It can make them perhaps a little bit more focused on their own individual situation, but if you are wanting to bring more social interaction or pleasure into your world, or you wanted to demonstrate your creativity in a professional context, the confidence that those two can create between them is something to really embrace in a big way. It's just that the full moon in Scorpio, where the moon is in her fall, on the 12th, could see you have a moment when you don't feel quite as assured. And the reason it's your 4th house, that's where we need to feel safe. It needs to be where we're more protective. And because the Sun is very close to the potentially disruptive Uranus in your sector of worldly interaction, and that will go on right through to the 20th, there could be a shaky part at the heart of this month if you're suddenly feeling a bit exposed, that the attention is almost too intense for where you are, especially if you're developing something that's very personal to you. However, the movement of Mercury into Taurus will certainly see you wanting to get tangible results for whatever hard work that you're putting in. Now, Mercury is itself going to combine with Uranus from the 23rd through to the 26th. If you're looking for a job, something can just seem to come out of absolutely nowhere, and it can be something that really could, if you seize the moment, and you may have to move very quickly, be very valuable indeed. But I'd like to tell you, Leo, that from the 20th onwards, there is a switch. The Sun moves into a much more idealistic part of your chart, but a much friendlier one which is much more about the network. It's much more about people, your friendships, your associations, but it's also about your highest hopes. It's joined on the 26th by Mercury, which rules that sign, which is very powerful. But intercepting that on the 25th, Saturn returns to Aries for the first time since 1999. Now, it depends on how old you are, but if you are more advanced in your life, you could look back to 1999 and recall what your experience was over those following 2.5 years, because Saturn in the sign of Aries is technically in its fall, because Aries is about initiation. Saturn can be about restraint, but also the 9th house where it moves into can be around things like travel. It can be around our mode of transport. It can be around our education. It can be around legal or contractual matters. And Saturn's going to ask you to consider all of those things over the next few years, but this is the first blush, lasting 3 months and 7 days through to the end of August. But if there is something that does need some resolution, you may find yourself seeking out expert help. Could be from a solicitor, maybe from an accountant, a business advisor. Maybe it's more of a personal issue that you want to get the voice of experience of a counsellor or a life coach. But don't be turned off from seeking that kind of support, because some of the information that you can gain over these next 3 months could be hugely valuable. Also, Saturn immediately links with Pluto, so if there is someone that you are very in touch with and connected to, rather than feeling in that kind of competitive energy at the start of the month of Mars opposite Pluto, this could see some people actually decide to align in a more formal way. So it could be a business contract, it could be a relationship where you take that next step towards a more binding commitment. For some people that could be by moving in, for others it could be actually getting married. If we think of Saturn can seal the deal, but of course it can also break things down. So the idealism that Venus and Neptune create at the start of this month, by the end of the month, as Neptune is aligning itself with Pluto, the last 10 days within 3 degrees, again, like Venus, for the first time in our lifetimes, that gives you an opportunity to examine whether your hopes can be matched by the reality around certain relationships. But on the 27th, the new moon in Gemini is very, very close to Mercury. Over the next month, if there are people you want to connect to, there are those that you want to spend more time with socially, mixing and mingling. There could be someone you feel quite flirty and drawn to, with Venus and Mars reaching their peak on the 22nd in their gorgeous sextile. I can't tell you how good that is. It really is superb. And then as the month closes, Mercury sits right in the disk of the Sun, a cazimi. A fantastic opportunity to think very long term about what's really important to you. Sometimes we can all get caught up with just dealing with the reality of life, and I feel that April was probably quite a tough month, particularly for intimacy, shared finances, or being clearer about who's in and who's not in, where there's a commitment or devotion or not. So as the month comes to a close, I feel there's a much lighter vibe. The air of Gemini just helps the flow of communication. Things can be moving around more. You can feel much more optimistic. I think collectively we're going to be experiencing that as well, to be honest. I think it's going to be much more gratifying. So as you come into the final part of this month, if you have a plan, a set of people that you love being with, or a hope or expectation that you want to fulfill, this can be a great chance to use the determination, self-belief and confidence of Mars being in your sign to really push forwards in a very, very powerful but also very dynamic and exciting way. Have a great month, Leo. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember to check out my new website, please, at www.patrickarundell.com. You can get your free natal horoscope. It's absolutely brilliant. The big three, the ascendant, sun and the moon, but also you can find out exactly where your other planets are, the signs they're in, the houses they're in, and critically the relationships between them. You can also sign up for your free daily written horoscope. Please see below for more.